Good afternoon. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Plummer. Many of you know me. Dr. Backrick had asked me to discuss a little bit about concert band arranging. Before my time here at Maranatha, I was a staff ranger for the U.S. Army, and my duties included doing a lot of assignments that required me to do multiple arrangements for concert band ensembles. And so my thought process today was to talk a little bit about the timbre of each instrument that you're going to commonly find in the concert band and discuss what those qualities are like, and then we kind of talk about some ideas of how we can incorporate those from an arranging perspective. So we're going to talk about for time's sake, we're going to eliminate the percussion aspect of this, and we're going to discuss mainly the woodwinds and the brass and some of those idiosyncrasies that go along with each one of those groups. So the first instrument I want to talk about is the piccolo. Now the piccolo is a transposing instrument, and it sounds an octave higher than it's written. And I've got a chart here, so if you want to screenshot this, or I can provide PDFs after the fact for situational awareness. But this miniature member of the flute family is a joyful sounding instrument at the top of the concert band. In its upper register, its brilliance can be heard above everyone else, and it blends well as reinforcement to the flutes and can be used independently as a solo instrument. The piccolo is extremely effective when used in sweeping scale passages, trills to brighten up the upper octaves of the woodwind section, and its character can be very striking in short percussive passages with other woodwinds. Brasses, or when doubled with the xylophone. It's the most agile instrument in the band, and I would caution overuse, however, as its appeal is best tolerated in small doses. So after the piccolo, we have the flute. And the C flute is a non-transposing instrument. It can be lyrical, soulful, cute, busy, chattering. You can see the areas of the range where it's weak, softly transparent, clear and bright, or even shrill at times. A very nimble instrument. It is capable of playing legato, staccato, scales, sweeps, arpeggios, repeated notes, and trills. Flutes have no great sustaining power, and they can't be counted on for large dynamic ranges, so attention should be paid to the weight of the background during exposed flute passages. And one of the common areas that a lot of beginning arrangers do is that they will write a flute melodic line, but then they bury it with the surrounding background. So make sure that it's in the appropriate range, tessitura for what you're writing for. Okay. Next we have the clarinet. The B-flat clarinet, I've got a little blip down here. It's transposed up one whole tone, the most versatile of all woodwinds. It has extraordinary flexibility and expressive qualities. It's got the most extensive range of any woodwind instrument. It combines well with members of its own family, and it mixes smoothly with other woodwinds and saxophones. It has more control over dynamics than any other solo instrument. In the hands of a skilled performer, the clarinet can handle fast, scale-like passages, arpeggios, trills, skipping registers, and changing volumes instantly. So it seems to get along with everyone. Think of it almost as the string section of the concert band. Okay, with the addition of a bass clarinet, it can sound beautiful as a clarinet choir, or it can be the lead voice over saxophones, maybe an open or closed voicing. Actually, we'll go back here. In its lowest register, what we call the shallow mode register, the clarinet sound is intensely colorful, and it's quite useful for doubling euphoniums and other low woodwinds. The middle, or the throat register, is the least productive part of the instrument, and this is where it's important as an arranger to understand the characteristics of an instrument. They have something called the break, going from like B flat to B natural, which for those of you clarinet players, you understand. I remember in education classes having to take that, and that's quite the adjustment. So we have to be careful. It has the weakest tone, and it's the most difficult to manage technically, especially for younger players. So when you're writing in that range, we have to be careful about the technical facility of what we're doing and how it speaks. The upper clarion register is by far the best. It's clear and brilliant, expressive and pure, and is a lyrical solo instrument. It really is a fine representation of how you want to state something. The bass clarinet is tuned in B flat, and it sounds exactly 1 octave lower than the B flat clarinet. It is written in the treble clef, up 1 octave, and a tone from where it sounds. And so you can see where it's actually going to sound and where you need to write that. And so for the non-transposing instruments, obviously you play concert pitch and it will translate. But some of these other instruments, like clarinet and B flat, need to be transposed to make that adjustment work. The oboe is a non-transposing instrument, written and sounding in C. Its optimum register is from middle B flat to high C, and it's capable of some technical facility, including sweeps and unisons with its fellow woodwinds. The oboe can be emotional or lighthearted, possessing a very expressive quality that makes its solo possibilities most gratifying. Oboes are very effective when voiced in thirds and sixths or in combination with flutes or clarinets. I personally try to avoid extreme ranges of the oboe, as the low register can become harsh and the difficulty of the instrument can come into play in its highest register. I had an instance when I was stationed in Virginia. I had written a concert band arrangement for one of the groups there, and after the rehearsal I remember writing a low B flat at the piano dynamic marking, and it was fairly exposed, and I think the oboe player was about ready to smack me upside the head with her oboe. So it's important to understand in this case that in low registers it can be somewhat harsh. So it's important to understand the nature of the instrument as we are writing for those. After the oboe, we have the English horn. Not something you're going to see a lot of, more of a utility instrument at times. It is built in F, and it's written a fifth higher than it sounds. Although it is similar in pitch to the oboe, it has a deeper and more subtle quality. Its dark timbre is especially useful for, think of almost like a haunting melodic treatment. And it can reinforce other instruments. So from an orchestral perspective, you think of the viola or the cello were appropriate. But to get the most from your double reed woodwinds, you want to use the English horn sparingly. Okay, the bassoon is a non-transposing instrument written primarily in the bass clef. The upper register is often written in tenor clef to avoid an overabundance of ledger lines, and the ledger lines can become quite tedious. So a lot of times in these more versatile instruments, you're going to see these clef changes to kind of help eliminate some of that. When it's used as a solo instrument, its pale sound can convey feelings of pain, fear, sadness. When it's played short staccato passages, on the other hand, it's an excellent instrument that can portray humor, sometimes doubling the melody line many octaves below the piccolo. It's one of the best mixers in the whole band. It serves well as the underpinning of the woodwind or horn sections, and it can execute arpeggios, and its middle and higher registers blend well with clarinets and flutes, so that's going to give you a little bit of strength and virility to the woodwind choir. Okay. Saxophones have a remarkable flexibility, and I've got the homogeneous blend here of saxophones. So the saxophone family, they can play rapid passages and sustained phrases equally well, and can be the tonal center of the band, mixing ably with pretty much everyone. Since they have fewer endurance problems, they have a reed that needs to vibrate versus embouchure for some of the brass players, that can fatigue over time or range. They can be used more extensively than other sections. And they are very responsive instruments that can play smooth ballad sections or even expressive solos. I like to use them to augment the French horns and vice versa. They have a similar timbre. And you'll find that the soprano and the tenor are in B flat, and the alto and the bari are in E flat. And once again, you've got the sound range and then the written range of how we need to write those. Okay. I've included some possible woodwind combinations. So every member of the woodwind family discussed previously is quite capable as a solo instrument, but when combined and used in a symphonic band, they're practically an orchestra within themselves. And so while the woodwind choir is certainly capable as an independent tonality, when it's blended with horns or strings, it adds strength, fullness, variety, and heightened expression. So some of the following suggestions can be helpful when scoring for the woodwind ensemble. Okay, it's always prudent to write in the most comfortable range of each instrument. And that's why I've given you some of these representations and these pictures to show you, okay, what range and what result am I going to get by writing in this specific range of the instrument. Unison in 2 or more octaves offers a very viable and useful sound. A lot of times when I'm writing marches, it's not uncommon, especially in the clarinets, to actually have the section in octaves. So, 1 octave, another octave, and then another octave down for clarity and strength and power. When writing woodwind solely, concern yourself with how much, if indeed any, background will be employed. And for a genuine woodwind treatment, forego the use of saxes or high piccolo. When you're writing for orchestras, I know this is a band thing, but something to remember. Harmonic treatment of the woodwind choir is more effective when the orchestration is not too dense or clustered. So same thing in a concert band setting. If you start combining a lot of low brass and things that can muddy up the sound, you got to be careful that you're not going to push that out, that timbre out, and overshadow that. The spread of at least a third between any given part produces the most satisfactory results. When combined with brass, woodwinds project better when placed in an upper register, because once again, they're not going to get lost in the mix. You want to make sure that they're going to be able to sail over the top of that. When writing for school bands, refrain from writing fast passages through the break. Remember I said the break from the B flat to the B natural for second and third clarinets, because that requires a more advanced player. And as an arranger, I'm always writing for my players, and you want to know what they're capable of doing. It's one thing to put it into Finale or Sibelius or Dorico or Muse or music notation software of choice, but just because it plays it back and it sounds good doesn't necessarily mean it's a practical way of writing. You have to understand the idiomatic writing for the instrument and for the players. The serious arranger should gain a working knowledge of these instruments, and the essentials are taught in many fine schools and textbooks. So you've got the Rimsky-Korsakov, the Arthur Anderson, the Adkins, even the Sam Adler book. I think I had that here, Sam Adler's book on orchestral orchestration. So it's important to understand what the instrument can do and how to write specifically for your players. As you can see up here, I've given you some possible woodwind combinations that would work. As a woodwind section, a lot of times you're going to see the winds in pairs, just like you would see in classical writing. 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets. And this just kind of gives you an idea of the possible combinations, and then think of it as a creative palette. So as an arranger, you start experimenting, and these are maybe some unison combinations that would work as well. Oboe and clarinet, flute and oboe, clarinet and bassoon. They will give you the unique sound that you're looking for in that expression of your musical ideas. So now we progress to the instrument families. And we're going to start off with none other than the trumpet. So the trumpet is pitched in B flat. It's written a whole step higher than it sounds. It has a most dynamic and penetrating tone. For those of us that have sat in front of the trumpet section, that's why I don't have any hair up there anymore, whether it's used as a solo instrument in a section, in prime unison, in octaves, maybe 2 in the upper register, 2 in the lower octave, or in place at the top of the entire brass section. So in combination with other instruments, it's equally effective playing in unison with an alto sax, or in octaves with trombone or tenor sax. It's the most flexible instrument in the brass family, and when played by a good performer, the trumpet seems to inspire confidence, making it reputedly the quote-unquote president of the brass section. By reserving sustained passages for the instruments best equipped to handle them, trumpet players are fresh when you really need their dramatic input. And once again, this is another mistake that a lot of arrangers make. They forget that when you play an instrument and it requires horn time on the chops, it can be very fatiguing, especially the range you're choosing. So even though the upper range in a trumpet projects beautifully, you also have to think practically. Okay, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So when you're writing, make sure that, higher isn't always better, and you need to give them some chop breaks, some time for them to get the blood back into the muscles to be able to be practical to do that. I've seen a lot of arrangers write some good trumpet stuff, but then you look and 64 bars goes by and the horn's on their face the whole time. So we want to make sure that we give them ample time to be able to perform as you would want them to. Okay, we have the trombone, which is personally my favorite instrument, and the trombone has positions. So instead of valves or keys, it has a long slide, and there are 7 generic positions, and these notes in these positions are based on the overtone series. And you can see that these are the notes capable within each position. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then seventh is almost a fully extended arm on the instrument. A big problem a lot of beginning arrangers try to do is that they will write glissandos, which trombones can do glissandos. But we have to understand that what is practical and what we think is practical are 2 different things. So some of these things here will list some of the possibilities of the notes that you can go from. Now, you can always fake it using your face and ways to try to do that, but you want to understand what notes are within certain partials of the instrument, and this will kind of help show you that if you're wanting to gliss from one note to the next and you want to do it legitimately without having to fake it, this is kind of the guide that you're going to have to use with some of these things concerning the trombone. Now, the bass trombone is a valuable asset to any band. The bass trombone is capable of playing the notes between the lowest note of the tenor trombone, which generally is a low E, down to the bottom pedal B flat. We call that a pedal B flat. It's the one right here underneath this second line. Now you'll notice that some trombones have what we call an F attachment. You push the trigger down, it adds extending tubing. So instead of that low E, you can keep going down. E flat, D, D flat, C, B natural, and then your pedal B flat, just right below that second ledger line. Okay. The bass trombone lends strength and depth to the bottom of the trombone section and adds a firm foundation to the low brass section. French horn is pitched in F, and the transposition is up a perfect fifth. It has a sound that blends well with woodwinds and brass, and you'll find that the French horn is a staple in both woodwind quintets and in brass quintets. It's equally effective playing a solo, helping out on unison lines, used in a horn choir, or soaring in unison over the band. It forms almost a velvet carpet when combined with the trombones. It's a very nice sound blending those 2 harmonies together. When writing horns in large brass ensembles, use the formula 2 French horns equals 1 trumpet or 1 trombone, and kind of get that idea in your head. Don't forget, the bell is pointing this way, and sometimes they will use a device like a shield to reflect that back, but that varies. So usually from a perspective, when you're looking at balancing out those sounds, I usually use the equation 2 French horns is equivalent to 1 trumpet or 1 trombone, so you can get that right balance. Now, by inserting the hand deep into the bell, the French horn player can muffle the sound. It assumes a very distant metallic quality and should be reserved for a dramatic effect where the background is light. And this is called stopping. Okay, and it's indicated by writing a plus over the notes where you wish it to be stopped, and then the resumption of the normal sound, you're going to write open. And you'll see French horn players, just by slightly moving their hand, can adjust the intonation of the instrument. After the French horn, we have the tuba. The tuba is a non-transposing instrument written in bass clef. The most common is the B double flat. Its sound is a very soft edge, and if you have access to a good tuba player, the tone can be smooth and plush. Its main role would be supporting trombones and horns, adding emphasis to figures and a quality to the sound. It gets around quite well, and it can be used to play its own line for short solos. Next, we have the euphonium or baritone. And the euphonium, like the trombone, it's a concert-pitched instrument built in B-flat with a B-flat overtone series. The harmonic series for this instrument is the same as that for the B-flat trumpet, and parts can either be written in bass clef or transposed up a ninth in treble clef. And so you'll find that sometimes you have euphonium players that choose to read in bass clef. So an open, for example, would be B-flat, F B-flat. But then with treble clef fingerings written up a ninth, then you think more along the lines of a trumpet. So then all of a sudden an open becomes a C, and then a G, and then a C. So depending on, most players play bass clef, but treble clef euphonium parts are also prevalent as well. Along with its strong carrying power, the unique tone of the euphonium shows off its individuality. Its execution is easy, and the majority of the notes speak well. It is capable of great expression, making it very suitable for solos and independent melodic lines. Although an odd bit of plumbing, it is considered the cello of the symphonic band, if you want to look at it that way. So we talk about scoring for brass. So I firmly believe that the brass choir is the most thrilling of all sounds. There are countless ways to approach this aspect of writing, as there are many kinds of rights and the right-wrong interface. And here's an opportunity to exhibit the music, the musicians, and the arranger at their artistic best. So I must add a word of caution. An arranger should use good judgment in writing for brass. Due to the makeup of these instruments and the manner in which the sound is produced, large skips and awkward pianistic figures are not what they're all about. So sometimes it's real easy, once again, to plug into that music notation software of choice and have it play it back, but you've got to think about the flexibility, the versatility required by the embouchure and the musician. So avoid the temptation of forcing an idea or a figuration that is not indigenous to the character or capabilities of the instrument. Your music is judged on how well it sounds and not how difficult it is to play. So we have to make sure that we understand that when we're scoring for brass. Okay, so voicing techniques. So you've got a couple of techniques that we can use. We have open versus closed. And you're going to find that in closed voicing, it means that the chord tones are placed as close together as possible, usually within a single octave or a tight vertical span. And what it looks like. So for example, if I have, let's say, a C major 7 chord, C, E, G, B, it's all within the octave. The voices are close together, and it works well in mid to upper registers. Where we're going to use closed voicing. So in the woodwinds, clarinets, and the flutes, in some of your sax sections solely writing, and in some block harmonies. And when you want a more homogeneous blended sound, that closed voicing is really going to give you that desired timbre that you're looking for. Some of the benefits: it's a smooth, warm, unified color. It's great for harmonic clarity, and it's good for simple lyrical passages. Now, some of the downsides are it can get muddy in the low register. Think about playing a chord on the piano. Sounds great in the mid-range and the upper range, but you take that down into the lower tessitura and into the cellar, as we would call it, it gets muddy. Well, this can get muddy in the low register, and there's less room for inner movement. So once again, you want to make sure that you're not creating speed bumps and let your own writing get in the way of what you're trying to express. Okay. We have open voicing. Open voicing spreads the chord tones farther apart, usually more than an octave between the top and the bottom, and often spacing larger intervals in the lower tones. And this is what it looks like. So before, I kept all that stuff within an octave. Now we're going to spread it out. So we're thinking, okay, C to a G, which is a fifth, and then G to E, which is a sixth, and then E to B, which is a fifth. So it's across 2+ octaves. And the low voices are spaced widely. The upper voices can be closer. Upper extensions are easier to include. And where we're going to use that, a lot of times in brass section writing, to get that full brass sound, you'll see that open voicing. Full band scoring, same thing. Orchestral wind brass chords, there's just something about an open voicing that gives you some breadth to that sound, that pad that you're going for. Or in commercial jazz ensemble writing, or in big band shout sections, to where everybody's got the same types of rhythm, and they kind of write those open voicings to give that more power and projection. Okay, the benefits: clear, powerful sound, reduces muddiness in the lower parts, and it gives more resonance and punch. It allows interesting interline motion. Now, if we look at some of the cons, it's harder for the weak sections to blend, and it can sound hollow if it's not balanced well. So we need to make sure that when we're writing open voicing, that we understand that idea of not making it sound too hollow if we've got the balance just a little bit off. Okay, so the arranging process itself, you've got to find a viewpoint. Okay, so we're looking at a working procedure. The first step is to familiarize with the song that you're wanting to arrange. You got to get the feel of the tune, the lyrics and all its elements. Find this viewpoint before undertaking the task. Don't put the cart before the horse, okay? The range of the song and the corresponding key is now of prime importance. So the song and your arrangement dictates the mood, the key, the style, the tempo, and other important considerations. Some of these may be worth contemplating. So many times the rhythm of the melody on the sheet music is different from the way it's usually performed. Now, I just conducted the Academy Band rehearsal a few hours ago for Mr. Bonema while he is gone. And we had a situation in one of the songs to where the low brass were playing a standard melody that they had heard, but they were playing the rhythms as they remembered hearing them in previous songs, and they weren't actually reading the rhythms on the page. I had to gently remind them, and we had to go through some of those rhythms to make sure that they were reading what's on the page. So many times the rhythm of the melody on the sheet music is different from the way it's usually performed. Then you ask yourself, is the primary focus on rhythm, harmony, or melody? What is the size and composition of the band? Okay, the valleys and peaks of the arrangement will be important. You're going to find that sometimes you're going to make your way up to a pinnacle or defining statement, and then you have to decide, how am I going to get up there? And then once I get up there, then how am I going to come back from that moment? Arrangement without a climax is lifeless. You may consider a key change that could appear later in the arrangement, and sometimes something as simple as migrating to another key. Think of keys as colors. And as an arranger, a lot of times, it's amazing just taking something up a half step or a major second or a minor third can completely change the sound. And so even the voicings that we are scoring can really change going either way. So it's important to understand that even a key change can change the sound of what we're doing. The use of a pedal point is a device that can be helpful as well. There's a procedure that has always worked well for me, and I've found that sometimes before going to bed at night, if I'm mindful of some of those ideas of what I would like to do, and I kind of think about maybe some of the directions I want to go with my arrangements, I've found that when I wake up in the morning, I've actually performed the groundwork and thought about preliminary details, saving myself from the work at hand. You know, the creative zone is an interesting zone to be in, and you're going to find that when that gets interrupted, you can't just turn it on and off. Sometimes it takes a while to get those juices flowing. And so I found if I do that before I go to bed at night, there's something about having a nice evening's rest, and you wake up in the morning and then all of a sudden you're ready to go. I'm also convinced that having the music in my thoughts just prior to sleep subconsciously generates the flow of ideas needed for that particular arrangement. Okay. So then we have fundamentals. Time permitting, it's easier to make a concert sketch than writing directly to a full score. A lot of writers will use a 6-line, 8-bar pad to demonstrate this. Excuse me. Don't necessarily need that, but in writing sketches, use as many shortcuts as possible. And this is another beginning arranging mistake. They want to try to put too much too soon. And the idea is you've got ideas in your head about what you want to say, get it out on paper. You don't even have to worry about the rest. Just if you want this group to have this line, write out the line just real quick, and then write out maybe some of the background pads that you want or things behind that. Take advantage of any device that will make the chore of notation easier. And this keeps things moving past the pure mechanics of the job. Obviously, you're going to have to sit down and write the harmonies and things of that nature in the articulation. But when you're just getting ideas out, you want those ideas to flow and you don't want them to stagnate. And that's why it's important to just kind of get that process going as part of the fundamental process. Okay. In the event the arrangement is instrumental for concert band, in this case, the arranger must know who he's writing for and what the purpose is to be written. Now, a lot of times, being here at Maranatha, our inspiration is going to be drawn from things from Scripture and things of the sacred nature. So it's important to remember the purpose for what you're writing it for. Consider the totality of the piece. It could be a production number, it could be a solo feature, or it could be a multi-tempo arrangement. But what flexibility will you have with a given instrumentation? And you will ultimately base all of your arranging decisions on this information. So before commencing, scan ahead, mentally make a brief blueprint so you won't be halfway through the arrangement and then you're going to find that you've expended most of your resources. It's real easy to just kind of regurgitate everything out real quick, and then you got nothing left for the finish line. Assuming you have this information, you could possibly start with a basic melodic idea, and then following this procedure, you could find the tempo that has the correct feel for that melody. When writing an arrangement, the emphasis will probably lean toward a theme that originates with rhythm. So regardless of idiomatic differences, the principles of consistency and relationship will remain the same. After establishing a primary motive, possibly a bass figure, you can add supportive elements until you've reached that balance of melodic and rhythmic flexibility for which you are looking. So we talk about the melody. So we touched briefly on writing a melodic line. I want to expand a little bit on that subject. So the three primary elements of music are melody, harmony, and rhythm. The common denominator is the melody, and a good one can stand alone by itself. When you hear a good melody, you can whistle it as you're walking to and from your car. You can sing it freely in the shower, needing no support whatsoever, since a grain of the other two elements are inherent in its structure. The melodic line is equally compelling whether it is in the cantabile scored for a symphony orchestra or a figured played by a concert band where there is no keyboard. So when you're writing a meaningful melody, it requires sensitivity and a capacity for lyrical expression. And to acquire and improve these requisites, my advice would be to analyze your favorite melodies. What's so enticing about that particular melody? Listen to it, listen to recordings, soundtracks, read scores, seek the advice of other successful arrangers that have done it before, and using these references as a springboard for your own ideas, they will enable you to absorb what you like so that your artistic skills will grow. And this in no way impedes creativity. Ultimately, your music will be a conglomerate of them all and more. So it's just a matter of doing it over and over again. Now, the melodic element, always try to treat the melody line as an element that should be free and clear of intrusions. So when using a block voicing, and we had talked about the open and closed voicing before, I usually try to avoid any interval less than a minor third next to the top of the melody line. You're thinking, why a minor third? You don't want it to get in the way of the melody line soaring above the textures below it. So now the exception would be maybe some low ensemble writing, but obviously counterpoint and special effects do not fall into this category. But we move from the melodic element to the rhythmic relationship. When writing a band arrangement, I try not to over-syncopate across the bar lines. Contrary to accepted precept, an overabundance of consecutive syncopation can be redundant, and it will stifle your momentum. It's kind of like icing on a cake. If you use it sparingly, it's a wonderful thing to do, but too much icing, bleh. Okay, so you want to make sure you keep everything in that perspective. And then as far as the harmonic relationship goes, your harmonic vocabulary should be absorbed and applied to arranging and composition. Alternate chords can bring freshness to a song and add interest and variety to your writing. However, I would like to state a personal preference. Substitute harmonies must be consistent with the character of the music. They should improve the original harmony, not submerge the melody or assume too much importance. So even worse, to change the melody of a tune to satisfy your substitute harmony is not very musical. So every once in a while, it's okay to use a substitute harmony than what you would normally think. Just don't let that get in the way and don't let that interfere with those expression of ideas. Okay, so we continue with introductions, transitions, and endings. So the freedom in these areas offers the arranger an excellent opportunity for some personal interpretation and to some degree composition. So the purpose of the introduction is to hold and engross the listener. So anticipating, promising, but never satisfying. It's almost like, you're developing that plot in a movie, so you got to keep them engaged. When writing an introduction, you want to take your ideas from the melodic content of the tune, write completely neutral sounding material, or hang your hat on a figure that works well against the melody. The latter is probably one of the most overworked devices, but has been proven time and again to be very efficient and a clever way to develop an arrangement. So I confess I don't always write the introduction first. Sometimes you get your inspiration from other parts and you kind of reverse engineer your way back to it. Many times I'll derive an idea from the transition that I've written, and then I'll proceed to use that material for maybe the introduction and then the ending. Think of them almost as the bookends that provide the unifying thread to the arrangement altogether, giving it the continuity for which I'm always striving to do as an arranger/composer. Trying to make the ending I am writing sound different from the many I have previously scored has always been a fairly tedious task. It's very easy to do the standard textbook, okay, let's do this ending, and let's do that one. Be that as it may, I would be remiss if I didn't regard this as an important step, inasmuch as it's the last statement I will be able to make. And think of it almost as the final note the audience is going to want to hear. And so you don't just want to be the standard cookie cutter ending every single time. So putting some time and thought into some of those things. So lastly, we should note that the pure sound of the band can be incredibly effective, and it's necessary to render some doublings effective. So I've got some possible combinations that, once again, we can use in the band. And this can kind of give you some ideas. Flute unison with French horns, oboe and muted trumpet, flutes, muted trombone, 2 octaves apart, or maybe with muted trumpets, 1 octave apart. Alto sax and French horns. I found a lot of time those two groups, those homogeneous groups, blend very well together. So a lot of times in a military setting, if we were doing, for example, tattoos at the Scope Arena in Norfolk, a crowd of 30,000 people that I'm writing a show for, well, if I don't have the requisite number of saxes I would like, or French horns or vice versa, I could intermix those two and they would blend beautifully together. Alto sax, trumpets as well, tenor sax, trombones because of the tessitura and the sound that it gets in those ranges, bari sax and trombones also. So if we think about it, orchestration is the combining of instruments to enrich, strengthen, and color music. The art of orchestration, it's a combination of mechanics, aesthetics, and it is teachable. It demands more technique than inspiration, I will say. Orchestration skills can be learned out of Sam Adler book and some of the others, usually by some form of systematic study. We talk about part writing, we talk about the do's and the don'ts, or acquired through the absorption of a given musical environment. Some of the best musical lessons I've learned have been making mistakes in a live setting. And I remember, oh wow, I thought that would work. Finale played it back just fine, but boy, that was not a good situation. So you take notes of those things and you make those mental notes in your mind. You're thinking, okay, this is going to work. This is not going to work. Our concern to this point has been principally with the knowledge of instrument ranges, and I've taken you through that plethora of these instruments, and this is where it sounds good, this is where it sounds dull, this is where it's nice and dark, and this is where it's maybe shrill, okay? And listing the pure colors of the band and those characteristics. If we were to constantly employ the same resources, our result would be dreary and boring. So since each musical instrument possesses its own unique tonal color, the combination offers a wide range of textures that can be used to add variety and spice to an arrangement. So through this selective orchestration, moods can be created. They can be brilliant, dramatic, dull, sad, quiet, light. A fundamental staple of the arranger's repertoire is a real sound language. Just like each one of us tells our own story the way we want to tell it, that's, as an arrangers, that's the choice that we get to do. I used to watch Bob Ross all the time, and he would paint his little pictures in trees and have his happy accidents, okay? And I was always fascinated by this plethora of color, and the sky's the limit. And so as an arranger, you can develop a real sound language based upon your creativity. The arranger becomes an artist, musician, and craftsman, blending individual shades of pastels to proverbially cover your mural. So I believe that most instruments, considering range and musical situations, will effectively combine. However, some will sound better than others. And so that's where it's important for us to be able to experiment and kind of make notes. And I've listed some possible combinations that might work. But in conclusion, I find it personally exciting when working within this environment. A lot of times my desk or my arranging studio would be covered with pages that offered an abundance of musical expression. Ideas here and scribbles here, and yet all the pages that I orchestrate can never replace an actual musical tone, since music is not notes on the paper, it's sound. And every arranger must hear the music as he writes it. Beethoven did. I remember, as a little piece of music history, his Heiligenstadt Testament about letter to his brother, I believe, talking about him losing his hearing and almost having to put his head on the piano to be able to hear what he was writing when he was doing his Ninth Symphony. Okay, hear the music as you write it. Okay, it's not just writing notes on paper, it's actually hearing it as you write it in your mind. A keen eye will expose many combination of instruments that color the music throughout the course of this discussion. In applying your personal touch to the music, a few relevant questions will need some answers. So as you go about this process, you think, what is the character of the music? Does it suggest light or heavy scoring? Is the music emotional or humorous, bright or melancholy? I mentioned before, key signatures are like colors, and yeah, you can start off with the basic red, yellow, and blue, but then you can progress to the Crayola 64 pack or the 128 pack, where all of a sudden you don't have reds, you've got magentas and maroons and burgundies and all the neat nuances of each color. What instruments are best suited to play the music from the viewpoint of technique, range, and color? Develop your ideas and transform them into a language that musicians can understand. So in this brief overview of approaching concert band, I hope this has given you an idea of, okay, these are the main instruments you're going to find in this particular instrumentation. And through some of the charts and the graphs and the figures that I've shown you, I said, okay, this is the typical range. Now, your advanced players, in some cases, are going to go, in some instances, below the range, and some are even going to be able to go above it. But once again, know who you're writing for. I know when I would do commercial writing, I would want to meet my lead trumpet player. Okay, what's this guy capable of playing? Does he have a double high C? Or does he just have a nice strong A below that, or a G? And so then I would write my stuff according to what that person was capable of doing. But as you go through all of those instruments, and you can say, okay, this is what this particular section is capable of, and this is what this one does, and this is who they pair well with, then it's almost like, okay, Bob Ross is pulling out his oils and he's saying, okay, let's put some alizarin crimson here and some phthalo blue, right? And all of these other specific colors. And as you start mixing them together, you'll say, that one didn't work. I really like that one. And you know what? That one really, I wouldn't think it would, but it did. It went really well with this one. And that's the joy of arranging for concert band. So take all these aspects that I mentioned with these instruments, their tendencies, and understand that as an arranger, we have the wonderful opportunity to be able to speak that language of creativity, and understanding that you have a unique voice that no one else has. And we do study part writing. We do understand the rules of Western music and harmony. But then the fun part gets into, well, how do I want to represent that? And what colors do I want to use? And hopefully this brief discussion has given you an insight into the instruments found within this particular idiom, and the idea behind what each instrument sounds in each range. And you're going to find that instruments at the bottom part of a range are going to have different carrying power and different emotional power. And I'm sure Dr. Bachrach can be willing to elaborate on the ethos of music and its effect on the affections and the emotions. But the same thing applies to the range of the instruments, and determining what part of that range you want to express yourself with. And that's the beauty of it. So I hope this helps. And if you have any questions, feel free to stop by my office. I'd be more than happy to discuss any sort of arranging possibilities when it comes to concert band arranging and composition. So once again, thank you very much.